My name is Jan Rather. I'm the Infrastructure Engagement Specialist in the Mayor's Office with the City of Pittsburgh. And we're here tonight to talk about the North Ave Signals and Safety Project. Jump over to the presentation on our screen so that we can see what we're talking about. So we'll get started here with a quick agenda. The welcome and introductions, I'll introduce some folks and they'll introduce some others. We'll go through the meeting purpose, review of meeting norms, a brief overview on Zoom. Then we'll have the project presentation, and then we'll do some Q&A, and we'll also take questions via Zoom. If you want to put them in the chat, we'll make sure they get asked here. So I'm going to hand it off actually to Patty Kearns to introduce her project team.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. My name is Patty Kearns. I'm the project manager for the North Avenue Signals and Safety Project. With me tonight, I have Sean Stevens, our assistant project manager. I also have Dylan Fulmer, our construction manager from CH&D. Damon Rhodes, our construction manager from Larson. And Dan Diebner, our inspector for the project.
And on our staff, Lindsay is monitoring Zoom. She's here in the room with us. Before we dive into the purpose of the meeting, I want to invite two people up to speak. First, I'll hand it off to Councilman Wilson to just give a brief intro.
All right, thanks, Jan, and so technology advance here. So it's great to be back in this space. Thank you, Ken, and everyone at the church that makes sure that the community group and the city has access to a nice space like this to meet and talk about important things. Today, as you can see, that we're going to go over the North Avenue streetscape, really a whole renovation of that street, and something that's been, how long has it been? It's been like, so let me just say for myself, it's been, when I was running for office in 2019, everyone on the Mexican War streets was asking when this was going to get done. So
sounds about right.
If this isn't an education on how things get done in government, it just takes some time. A lot of earmarks out there for whether it was past Congressman Doyle did some earmarks in the past. Cities put some money in, so obviously we'll put the rundown of everything that's happening here, and the continued support from everyone that's in those positions has been incredible. I know I've been engaged in this project for feels like a couple of years now on specific designs and potential designs that could happen, and really looking forward to what you all are going to see. I know there's been some past engagement, but any project that has immediate upgrades to your neighborhood is always the best project, because it's immediately you can see the benefits to how it's going to better connect to the park. It's going to make walking, cycling, and even for drivers, I think there's a lot of different safety features in here. But I think the main point that the main aspect of these types of projects I always love is just the connection to the park. So even working through some of the design aspects, I think we continually think about how we can connect the community to this great park, and just making sure that people that are using these streets are really enjoying it, and it's really back to a neighborhood street. I have a great moment that I had with Domi when I first got in. And I see Sean smiling because we worked on a lot of different traffic calming projects together. But Domi is, don't tell anyone, but it's my favorite department, because they like ideas and they run with the ideas, and engineers like to give me new terms that I didn't know before. But when I first got in office, they presented a bunch of different things they could do in the district they were waiting to do. One of them was to make Brighton Road there, the one section of Brighton Road that does connect to the park, or that is adjacent to the park. It's from Ridge Avenue down to Brighton, and they were like, we're going to put this bike lane in, and we're going to, what's it called? Road diet. We're going to do the road diet. And I was like, great. How about some parking protected bike lanes. And they were like, really? You're okay with that? I said, let's do it. So it's been a great experience ever since then. I don't know if you're pushing me or I'm pushing you sometimes, but either way, I appreciate everything you're doing. And for the community, looking forward to your comments. And the one thing I ask is to just please be patient once we get into the construction phase, because it's going to be a mess. It's usually what I say when we do big projects like this. And I appreciate the contractors here and the inspectors here, and appreciate everyone that's going to be working hand in hand with Domi, the community, to get this done. So thanks, everyone. Oh, and also I've been forgetting to thank my staff sometimes, which is really terrible on my part. But I want to thank my chief of staff, Julian Haluska, for always being the person that's connected me to the community for an everlasting conversation. So thank you, and looking forward to tonight. Thanks.
Okay.
Oh wait, Giorgio's Pizza.
Yeah.
You gotta give a shout out to Giorgio's Pizza. We gotta put that in the announcement next time.
I got that.
That's this.
Yeah, so the councilman beat me to it, but yes, pizza provided tonight by Georgia's Pizza. And then I want to invite up Pastor Ken Turnbull just to welcome folks to the space here. I think this is my third or fourth meeting hosted here. They've been really great partners. So just hand it off to you.
Thank you. Again, we built the community hub to welcome the community. So I love having these gatherings, and just want to invite everybody back. We're having 6 Christmas programs at the end of the month, and there's little invitations at the back. So welcome. Thanks for being
here. Pardon our slightly different technical setup. Usually the unsung heroes of these community meetings are City Channel. They do an amazing job. So we kind of have to muddle through it when we don't have them, but we're testing how this goes, and we'll make corrections in the future. But why we're here tonight is to inform the public of the project improvements between Arch and East in advance of construction. Patty's going to talk about a lot of that. Provide updates on new aspects of the project since last engagements, share information about construction and the impacts associated, and then at the end we'll answer questions and collect comments from folks. One kind of critical difference between this and some of the earlier engagements is that design is basically wrapped up, so we're looking for comments about construction impacts, questions along those lines, but happy to answer anybody's questions on anything else. Just a couple meeting norms now that we're here and settled. First and foremost for us, we're talking about safety projects, but we really want your physical and psychological safety to be first and foremost while you're here. Talk a little bit about that in a second. Encourage folks to listen to learn, be open to new ideas, assume best intentions. That's both from the city and your neighbors when they ask questions. Disagree respectfully, appreciate differences. And the reason you're here, be present and speak up if you do have questions. For folks on Zoom, we just ask that you remain muted, use the chat function, and after the meeting, we'll have Lindsay help ask questions. You can feel free to leave comments in the chat, and then, like I said, Lindsay will be there to help with that. So our quick safety overview, I think we all came in through one of these 2 doors. If you make a right out here, there's an exit, and I believe there's an exit out and back to the left as well. First aid, I think, is back in the community hub space. Not sure about an AED, but there is one also back in the community hub space, I'm being told. And then I'll be the person to call 911 if anybody here is experiencing a medical emergency, so just let me know. With that, my role for tonight is pretty much over until the Q&A, so I'm going to hand it off to Patty to talk about the project.
Thanks, Jan. So we're going to jump in by starting to talk about the design for North Avenue and the North Avenue corridor. So I'll start by talking about what the purpose of the project was, and that was to upgrade traffic signal infrastructure as well as improve the corridor safety with an emphasis on pedestrian traffic and folks using transit along North Avenue. So to accomplish these goals, we're implementing the improvements listed on your screen there. We're doing a right sizing of North Avenue, and that means we're maintaining one through lane in each direction between Arch and Cedar, with the addition of some left turn lanes where warranted. We're also installing intersection curb extensions, or you may have heard them referred to as bump outs before. So we're installing those at a majority of our intersections along North Avenue as well. We're also installing a bus pullout with queue jumping technology at North and Federal. And this is fairly cool technology. It's the first time that we're installing it in the city, and I'll get into a little bit more about that and what you can expect with that later on in the presentation. But pretty much it will reduce bus blockages while boarding and reduce delays by prioritizing buses through the signal. At all of the traffic signal upgrades that we have along the corridor, we're adding what are called leading pedestrian intervals. Has anybody heard of an LPI before? It's, for those that haven't, it's the 3-second head start that we give the pedestrian walk phase before vehicles get the green light. And this allows them to really take ownership of the crosswalk before vehicles even start moving. But with this project, kind of last but not least, we're also including on-street parking, and that you might view as an improvement within itself, but we also look at it as a safety improvement. A lot of times it can have traffic calming effects by slowing down vehicles through the corridor, and it acts as a buffer between live traffic and your pedestrian walk space along the sidewalk. Okay, so for those that aren't familiar with the project, we're anticipating to install these improvements in the area that's kind of highlighted in that blue box on your screen there. North Avenue is running parallel with your screen, and this project extends from Arch Street all the way to East Street along North Avenue. Okay, so when we talk about the project improvements, let's dive into the traffic signal upgrades first. We plan to upgrade the traffic signals at the intersections of Arch, Federal, Sandusky, and Cedar. I want to take a second to mention the intersection of North and James real quick, because the last time we spoke to the community back in April of 2023, North and James was a part of our scope. Unfortunately, based on some funding restraints, we had to kind of pull this out as a separate project. And we'll kind of get into what that looks like and what the status of that is in a future slide. So when it comes to the traffic signal improvements, there's a couple things that I want to mention. For those that are familiar with the corridor, we have a pedestrian exclusive phase that's installed at the intersection of North and Cedar right now. I don't know if anybody in the audience is familiar with that, but the pedestrian exclusive is also referred to as a ped scramble or a barn dance. It's referred to as a lot of things, but basically what it boils down to is all of the walk phases come on at the same time, and the vehicles phases all have the red light. So a lot of folks kind of look at this as a safety benefit, but when it comes to traffic signal engineers, we try to avoid putting these in only because they lead to low compliance. Because a lot of times what's happening is we're asking the pedestrian to wait till all the vehicular phases are complete until they can cross. So a lot of times that's a minute and a half. And what we see typically is people won't necessarily wait that time. So for North and Cedar, we're going to take out that ped exclusive and replace it with what we call pedestrian recall. Another kind of, consequence to the ped exclusive, it's typically activated by pushing the button at the signal. When we install pedestrian recall, that means you're going to approach the intersection, you don't have to push the button, and you get the walk phase every time. So there's a benefit there, and it also means that the intersection is more efficient because you don't have to add 20-30 seconds for just a walk phase, an exclusive walk phase. Another signal improvement, excuse me, sorry. Another traffic signal improvement that we have along the corridor is what we call progression or coordination. And what I mean by progression or coordination, that means that the signals along the corridor will be timed in kind of such a way that as you're traveling down the corridor, you're going to go through multiple green lights without having to stop at every intersection and get the red light. And that's going to be between Arch all the way to James. As I mentioned before, we're also adding left turn lanes where warranted. And as part of this project as well, we've got pedestrian safety improvements at some of the unsignalized intersections, and those include Red Hour, Boyle, Linden, and Middle. Okay, so let's talk about the intersection of North and James. This is the intersection that we needed to pull out based on that funding restriction, the funding restrictions or the constraints that we had. And what I want to kind of highlight here is that there are going to be some minor upgrades to this intersection that will include as part of this project. One being an upgrade to the traffic signal controller or the brains of the intersection so that we can keep that progression or coordination through the corridor. We'll also kind of upgrade the the pavement markings at the intersection as well. And something else I want to mention is that the city is currently going after grant funding for this intersection. And once we have the funding secured for the construction of this project, we'll be able to provide a better timeline. In the meantime, our designer is kind of finishing up the final touches to the plans, and we anticipate that the plans will be finalized by spring of next year. So the thought is that once we get funding online, we'll be able to head right into construction for that one. And another thing that I'll add is that that work includes the traffic signal upgrades, but it also includes the concrete bump outs that we were proposing as well. Okay, so let's jump into the aerial here. On the screen here, we've got traffic signal upgrades at Arch and Federal. And we also have pedestrian safety improvements at Red Hour. Our proposed bump outs are shown with that blue shaded color. And if you focus in on Red Hour Street, you can see one of our proposed pedestrian refuge islands that kind of extends through that green area. And that green area is the proposed center median area. This area will include space for plantings, landscaping, and that'll be provided as part of a future project and maintained by another party. Parking is indicated with the pink and purple shading on the screen. And how we chose that pink and purple color to indicate the parking, I just want to clarify that we won't be adding any additional smart loading zones or those purple curved parking that you may have seen in other areas around the city. That won't be as a part of this project. The last thing I want to mention is the bus pullout and bus queue jump at North and Federal. As I mentioned, this will be the first time that we implement in the city of Pittsburgh. So I kind of wanted to provide a couple pictures here to kind of show you what it's going to look like. And again, this is the bus pullout will reduce the bus blockages while boarding. And the queue jump at the signal will prioritize the buses through the intersection. It does that by allowing buses to move through the intersection ahead of vehicular traffic by giving them an early green light. Essentially jumping the queue of waiting cars. And this reduces the delays and improves overall transit efficiency along the corridor. So when you look at the pictures here, let's start with the one, I guess, your left. That's going to give you an idea of what the signal actually looks like. When you compare it to a typical traffic signal, it's got 2 signal heads as opposed to 3. and it's not using colors to indicate the stop and go movement. So for this bus signal, you have 2 signal heads, and the stop condition is indicated by a horizontal white line, and the go indication is represented by a vertical white line. So if you look at the picture next to that, it'll kind of give you an idea of the phasing. To the left of that picture, you have what the vehicles along North Avenue will see, which is your typical traffic signal. So when North Avenue has the red, and the bus signal has a horizontal white line, that means that no one's going to go. When that switches to a vertical line, that means the buses will go and get that queue jump that we've been talking about. When that transitions to a horizontal line, it'll mean that buses in that lane will have the red light essentially. And then North Avenue will get the green light and continue on with their phase. Okay, so moving along down the corridor here, we also have a traffic signal upgrade at the intersection of North and Sandusky, and pedestrian safety improvements at the intersections of Boyle and Lorraine. And again, the blue shading indicates our proposed bump outs and pedestrian refuge islands. The green shading is that center median area that'll provide space for plantings and landscaping in the future. And the pink is the parking spots that are associated with the project. Okay, and moving even further down the corridor here, we have another traffic signal improvement at the intersection of North and Cedar. And as I mentioned previously, we have another signal, we have a minor signal upgrade to North and James, basically swapping out that traffic signal controller to ensure that we have that corridor coordination or progression that I mentioned previously. At North and James, we also plan to upgrade those pavement markings, as you can see on the screen there. And another thing that I'll point out is that we have the pedestrian safety improvements happening at Middle as well. You can see that proposed bump out with the blue shading there. And again, those bump outs serve as a traffic calming measure. They promote the slowing of vehicular traffic as they approach the intersection, and they shorten that pedestrian crossing length. Okay, so a quick summary. This project aims to improve accessibility and safety throughout the corridor by, 1, installing those bump outs and pedestrian islands that you saw in the aerial, adding leading pedestrian intervals or that 3-second head start at the pedestrian walk phases at all of our upgraded traffic signals, the right sizing of North Avenue or the lane reduction along North Avenue, and by upgrading the traffic signal components, the ADA ramps along the corridor. And when I say pedestrian signal components, I mean accessible push buttons as well as the countdown LEDs, pedestrian heads that you may have seen throughout the city. The upgraded traffic signal infrastructure and transit facilities also aims to improve mobility through the corridor. And we plan to do that with the addition of the bus pullout and queue jumping technology at North and Federal, the signal progression that I mentioned from Arch to James, and the removal of the pedestrian exclusive phase at North and Cedar. Okay, so now that we've talked about where the final design for North Avenue stands, I'd like to kind of talk about how we plan to construct it. And we've kind of boiled down our construction staging into 3 main phases. And in the next couple phases, we'll discuss those main construction phases, when they'll occur, and what impacts that they'll have on the community. For the first phase of construction, the contractor is going to focus on constructing that center median area. And I have a couple of views on the slide here that I'm using to kind of dictate that. So I've got a cross section of North Avenue up at the top there, and a plan view representation on the lower part of your slide. And on these images, the pedestrian routes are highlighted in blue, vehicular routes are highlighted in green, and our work zones are shaded in orange. So we plan to construct this portion of the project in spring of 2025, or next spring. It's quickly approaching. And during that time, we plan to maintain 1 lane in each direction along North Avenue. We also anticipate parking restrictions during our working hours, and those working hours are going to be, or I should say the restrictions to that parking will be between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Most likely Monday through Friday, or Monday through Thursday, I should say. And I just kind of want to point out why that's the case. So if you look at that plan rendering there, you can see in the green, you've got your vehicular travel lane on the north side of North Avenue. And you can see the orange spaces along the curb line there, that's the parking lane. So during our working hours, what we're going to try to do is push that vehicular route closer to the curb to give the contractor more room to build that median area. Okay, once they're done with the center median, they're going to move on to the southern section of North Avenue and start putting in those bump outs. We anticipate that this will take place between the summer and fall of 2025. And during that time, eastbound travel lanes will be maintained. However, we'll have to detour westbound traffic. And that's any traffic traveling from 279 in the direction of the Mexican War Streets. And that will only be during our working hours. So again, that's that 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. time frame. During that same time frame, we'll also have parking restrictions. And again, that's in order to give the contractor as much room as they need to install some of these facilities. Once they have the southern bump outs installed along North Avenue, they're going to switch to the north side. Well, I should say the northern section of North Avenue in the north side. But that'll happen during the winter of 2025, spring of 2026. And we're going to see similar impacts that we saw in the previous stage. So we're going to maintain that eastbound travel lane along North Avenue at all times. But the westbound travel lanes, again, the folks traveling from 279 in the direction of the Mexican War Streets, we're going to need to detour those folks during our working hours. And again, parking restrictions should be anticipated during those hours as well. Okay, so we want to kind of show you what that detour is going to look like during stage 2 and 3. So here's a map of the area. And on this map, shown in yellow, that'll be our work zone along North Avenue. And we have 2 colors representing the detour. Orange, shorter detour, and a purple, longer detour. And let's start off by talking about the orange detour. So again, westbound travel traffic will make a left on Cedar, go around Allegheny Circle, make a right on Ridge, and then another right on Brighton Road to get back to north. You're going to see this through a majority, if not the entirety of our project, through stage 2 and 3, I should say. However, I want to bring your attention to the work that's going to happen at North and Brighton as a part of that railroad bridge replacement project. That work is slated around 2026, and we unfortunately don't have a good date on construction. It's dependent on when a pedestrian bridge is going to go in. So we have to kind of account for that. And we want to show you the detour in purple as well. So if at the off chance that construction goes in at the end of our project, you're going to see that longer purple detour. But again, it's only going to be towards the end, and it'll be for a short time. Okay, so in the final stages of construction, that's when you're going to see milling and paving, or resurfacing of North Avenue. And you're going to see the energizing of the traffic signals, or in layman's terms, we'll be turning on the new signals and decommissioning the old existing signals. And we anticipate that to happen between the spring and fall of 2026. And during that time, we'll be maintaining 1 lane in each direction with parking restrictions during those working hours. And again, those are 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., most likely Monday through Thursday. And I mentioned earlier that safety was one of our main goals during design. And that goal kind of extends into construction as well. So, the impacts we've talked about this evening are needed to improve, are needed to provide enough space for the contractor in order for them to safely install some of the features that we've talked about. And I know that, some of these impacts are going to, cause some effects on your daily routine, but I hope that the community can kind of work on us to ensure that everyone on the project site remains safe, and we can kind of stay on schedule. Okay, so when we talk about next steps, physical construction is slated to begin in January 2025, or next month, so fairly soon here. And I'm looking at the contractor, making sure that they're ready. They're ready, okay. And our current project schedule has us completing the project in fall of 2026. During that time, if you're curious about where we are in construction or how the project is going, I encourage you to visit our Engage page at the link on the page. You can also submit questions or concerns through that portal as well. But I also want to highlight our project contacts. And that is Jan and Lindsay, who are here with us tonight. For any project concerns or comments, feel free to reach out to them as well. So with that being said, I'd like to thank you for your time this evening. At this point, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you have for me and my team. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Patty.
Yeah.
Lindsay, let me know. We already have at least 7 questions on the chat. So the way that I usually like to do this is to bounce between questions in the room and questions on Zoom. So are there any questions in the room that we can get started with? It's right here. And I'm going to pass out this lapel mic, so just talk into both if you can.
With the detours that you guys are planning, are you also doing some signal updates there? Because a lot of traffic flows through those intersections, which we don't normally see that level of traffic. So are you planning for that as well?
I'm going to grab a single mic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so when it comes to the detours and the traffic signal infrastructure that we have out there today, we'll be monitoring the signals. And if we do see some congestion, there are some tweaks that we can make. The problem is the traffic signal infrastructure out there is so old, and there's not a lot of flexibility with it. But it will be monitored throughout construction. And again, that is a concern that if you see it in the field, please reach out to us, bring it up.
I'm going to go to Lindsay to ask a question from Zoom.
All right, this question says, does this mean I will no longer have to push a button to cross at North and Cedar? Instead, I will have a 3-second head start to cross, and then I will have to dodge cars. I am unsure they will wait for an older person with a cane to cross.
That's a good question. And I'm going to kind of move back to the aerial that we had before, so that we can kind of take a look at what that intersection is going to look like in the future. The first part of that question was, you no longer have to push the button to cross, and that is correct. Because we have that ped recall that's getting installed at the intersection, the pedestrian walk phases will come up. Oh,
You can keep it straight.
Okay. Your walk phase is going to come up at every cycle. As far as your concerns about traffic yielding, vehicles yielding to you, that's kind of why we install that LPI, that 3-second LPI, because it puts you in the intersection and more visible, I should say, to cars before they even get the green light. So within 3 seconds, you should be able to make it maybe 2/3 or halfway through the crosswalk before cars even start traveling and getting up to speed. And even in that case, we're probably about per hour.
And Patty, do you want to clarify that the leading pedestrian interval is for parallel traffic? So the cars that you'll be in conflict with are the ones that are turning.
Correct. Yeah. So, I don't know if you can see my, well,
Yeah.
in present, yeah, you can't see in the presenting mode, but let's say you're crossing North Avenue with the pedestrian walk phase, and you can kind of see it on the left of your screen there. That means that the traffic traveling along Cedar is either going to make a left or a right. They're going to start that movement 3 seconds after you've gotten out into the crosswalk and become more visible. And again, I want to point out that we have bump outs on the northern and southern sides as well. Again, trying to make that pedestrian crossing length as short as possible. Again, trying to increase safety through there.
Thanks, Patty. Any questions? Yep.
Thank you. This all looks amazing. Is the bus stop at, I guess it's Sandusky and North, right in front of HH, is that bus stop moving?
You can kind of see the bus stops on your screen here. So the bus stops at Sandusky are remaining. And with this project, we're also proposing some bus shelter upgrades. So you'll see those as well.
All right, Lindsay, back to Zoom.
All right, this is a question from Aaron. It says, who will be responsible for maintenance of the planted medians?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're still working through that at the moment. What we know for this project is that we have the space to install those plantings. We just need to find an entity to install those plantings and maintain them in the future. We have a couple good leads, and we're just kind of coordinating that now. So good question. Unfortunately, not an answer at this time.
And I think we can look at, we can look at putting an update on Engage when we know more about that as well. So, any other questions in the room?
You explained that James Street has been removed mostly from this project. Is Middle and North still a part of the project?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So let me jump to that intersection there. We still have pedestrian safety improvements going in at North, and these are concrete bump outs, shortening the pedestrian crossing length. So that is something that we held for the project.
To follow up then, what phase of construction will that be done in? And then can you talk a little bit of what the street will look like east of Middle? So between Middle and East Avenue?
Sure. Yeah. So we kind of broke construction out to the 3 stages. In the first stage, we're going to be building that center median, which there isn't one at Middle. So a lot of this work is going to happen in the second and third stages. In the second stage, we're going to build the southern part of the bump outs. And then in the third stage, we're going to move to the northern side of the intersection and build those bump outs. As far as the improvements to East Street, that's just going to be refreshing of pavement markings and things like that.
All right, we'll go to Zoom.
All right, question from Mavis Rainey. Will you be extending the length of the pedestrian signal phases at each of these intersections? Will the pedestrian signals be audible?
Great question. Yes, the pedestrian signals will have the audible messages associated with them. And the times for the pedestrian crossings will be based on, current standards. So 3.5 feet per second, typical to what you'll see at throughout the city.
All right, amazingly, this mic is just magnetized to this thing, so maybe that works.
Maybe to follow up on Phil's question, ask a question of my own. From Middle to East Street, will that be 2 lanes going eastbound then still? Because that's what it is right now.
Yes.
That's a good question. Let me hand the mic over to
I'm Sean. I want to.
Oh, sorry.
I will need to triple check this, but if you're going down North Street, heading eastbound, coming towards 279. It will be one travel lane, but then after those intersection bump outs that are shown on the screen there, it will open up to 2 lanes so that there's enough queuing length for folks to get on 279 or either direction.
Then my question is, it seems that as part of this, there's been some parking that's been added to the areas. So 2-part question is the parking that's already there, is that going to stay the same that it is? Meaning if it's meter, it's going to stay meter. If it's RPP, it's going to stay RPP. And then the additional parking that's being added, will that be metered parking or will that be a residential parking permit?
Good question. You said RPP, oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure. This is gonna be metered parking, throughout North Avenue. The additional spots that we're including.
The new spot.
The new spots, yeah.
Like in front of the professional.
I don't, but
In front of, kind of on that, right between James and Cedar, and purple on the north side.
up there.
North side, that's gonna be metered, 'cause there's no parking there.
Yeah, let me, yeah,
I'm
That's-
90% sure it's gonna be metered parking. Any additional parking is subject to be metered.
metered, but we can double check that. We'll take a look at the plans and get back to you.
And we can probably update these images on the Engage page and just break that out if there's anything that's different. Lindsay, any questions?
Well, I was gonna ask if, just out of curiosity from like a neighborhood perspective, is there a feeling one way or the other? Would you prefer more residential permit parking or meter, just out of pure curiosity?
I don't speak the entire neighborhood,
Yeah.
I have a perception, but I mean, I think the stuff in front of the professional building. I don't know, you guys. I think you guys, yeah, stuff, sorry, hell yeah.
What's up, guys? I'd say that as I think Doug was about to say, correct me if I'm wrong, the purple parking in front of the professional building to the left makes more sense to me to be metered for potential hospital use, or, I mean, people go in and out of that bank all the time. That makes a little more sense to me than the space in front of the schoolhouse and across the street on North Ave. I think particularly, I live up on Knoll Street, and I know that residents in our area sometimes complain about the overflow of the hospital crowding our area and our streets from residential parking. So I know that just from personal conversations that more residential parking in the area would be appreciated. If that were to be all metered, I don't really know who that would necessarily serve on that side too much for short-term kind of parking. It's a little far. It's a little bit of a walk from our business district. So I don't know if that provides a parking boost to those businesses there. It could, it might, I don't know. Those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, it's between James and Middle right now. Between, I'm just too loud in general. Between James and Middle right now is already residential parking permit. The new stuff is gonna be by the professional building, and I don't have an answer to your
Yeah,
question.
no, I was
but
just
like,
mostly just looking for more context, and it passes my gut check too. I think why we wanted it to be pay parking is proximity to the hospital. There's a lot more turnover, you know, in front of a professional building that doesn't have dwellings in it. It makes good sense. I just wanted to, as a gut check. So thank you.
All right, we'll go to a question on Zoom. I think that's where we are.
All right, is there a bike route that will be implemented during construction?
So the bike route today is through the park. That'll be maintained through construction.
Where will pedestrians be able to cross North Avenue during construction?
Great question. So during construction, our contractor will only be able to work at one corner of the intersection per intersection at a time. So that allows us to really maintain that a good pedestrian detour, regardless of what corner they're working on. So at no point will we have two corners closed down at the same intersection. Hopefully that answers the question.
Question in the room.
Hi, I was wondering if you could mention specifically what kind of landscaping the medians would have and whether or not there'd be landscaping on some of the bump outs additionally. This is probably not flexible at this point, but whether they're like the kind of like sunken planters or raised planters or trees or anything like that? That's question one. Question two, is this at all coinciding with the East Ohio Street renovations that are going on?
Good questions. As far as the plantings goes, the plantings will only be in that center median area. The plantings are still kind of in the works, but I envision that they'll reflect the plantings that we have in the park, south to North Avenue. And in areas we have maybe 6 feet, 6 to 10 feet worth of space for these plantings. So I don't know if that's big enough for full-blown trees like you see along some of the other corridors. When we talk about East Ohio Street, I can say that the teams are coordinating, but they're acting as separate projects right now. So a lot of the improvements that you're seeing along North Avenue, you're going to see probably along East Ohio, but they're operating as two separate projects. Does that? Oh, I see.
Have to double check, but I don't think that the East Ohio streetscape project will go to construction until 2027, I believe. It could be late 2026. I know that we're just entering, we just wrapped the planning phase for that. I recognize some of you from some of the engagement that we've done during that phase, and we're entering preliminary engineering with a final design phase, and then construction thereafter. And it's a long timeline, unfortunately, for the funding structure that we work through. So,
All right, another question on Zoom.
Curious, are these improvements for city/neighborhood residents or commuters passing through our neighborhood?
A good question. So these improvements are for the residents that live in North Avenue, not necessarily commuters through the corridor. We didn't want to cause massive delays through the corridor by reducing the number of lanes here. So we were cognizant of that, but all the decisions we made were safety focused. And basically to solve that mobility goal that I mentioned, the safety and mobility goal, basically allowing for safe crossings between the neighborhoods to the north and the park to the south.
I'm going to go there and then back to you.
Two questions. Can the bus queue light, does that have a transponder with the bus and it only operates when a bus is there, or is that just every time?
Great question. I love the traffic signal questions, so keep them coming up. When it comes to the queue jump at North and Federal, it is going to work on detection. So we're going to have a camera detection mounted to the mast arm that'll pick up the buses in the bus pullout lane. Once the detection senses a bus, it'll pull in that phase, and the bus signal will activate.
Yeah, the questions about the plantings is pretty legit. The traffic calming that we have inside the park, those plantings have not survived. The first winter, we assume the salt got them. And so those plantings, they're pretty shabby now.
Okay, good to know. Yeah.
We'll do a quick follow-up right here.
Thanks, guys. Once again, this is John. So I represent the ACI, and we've had a large hand in picking in lobbying for the pedestrian islands in the park, kind of similar median plantings. And you're correct, they have not survived. There was a mixture of who maintained it. Part of it was they were. That was a great 2 weeks, but unfortunately, they I know. They basically were grasses that were not meant to be sheared, like cut. And that was a kind of a mistake with DPW or whoever was maintaining it. They cut them basically to the bone, killed the majority of the plants. Salting was an issue that, just base street salting negatively impacted them as well. But one of the issues that we noticed that maybe when you're bringing up the potential for or maybe someone else was raised plantings or like low profile plantings, we found that apparently these are not very visible because they keep getting smashed into and part of it in the beginning was like, all right, we get it. People are not used to a median being in this open roadway, and we excuse some of those accidents, but there's been an unfortunate amount of repairs to this concrete pouring. And I don't know if that's something that maybe a high vis raised planter would, I mean, trees that yeah, I agree with you. That's a little extreme, but maybe something a little more elevated, more visually popping. I don't know if that could solve the problems, but we'll probably be in contact if that's something that's still yet to be determined.
Yeah, it is. It's still in the works. So a lot of these comments we'll take to note when we start designing that landscaping. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, yeah, I bought.
Go ahead.
As I approached Erin Tobin and said, I've got a bunch of, I was willing to organize a planting for the 2 planters. And she just said, you can't do it. It's not safe. We can't have volunteers out there in the middle of, so, I mean, we're stuck with whatever y'all do. We can't make it better.
Thanks.
Yeah, there is definitely some type of safety issue with volunteers working in the middle of these median areas. So we'll take your comments and try to solve some of those issues.
We'll go here and then we'll come back to Zoom.
I have to say, I am disappointed that James Street didn't make the cut. I understand budgets. I'm project manager as well, so I hear you. But I'm wondering, is there any traffic calming measures at all that you could fit into it? So my driveway exits out on James Street right near North Ave. And I can't tell you how many times I've almost gotten into an accident because people just fly 40 miles per hour through the intersection from James, or even fly through North Avenue through the James Street intersection. So I know design's over, I understand, but is there like any wish list if you have extra funds around that we could do? Because I think that is necessary and there's a lot of accidents.
I hear you. Again, I'm a traffic signal engineer, so keeping the signal in the project, it hurt me to cut it as well. Not for the same reasons, obviously, but what we tried to do with our upgraded pavement markings is to kind of mimic those bump outs to kind of serve as an interim between this construction project and the concrete bump outs that are going to be installed as part of the James Street project. Now, I know that the pavement marking bump outs don't behave the same, and they don't motivate drivers in the same way that full-blown concrete does. Unfortunately, you know, I was just looking at the concrete bump outs the other day. The problem with installing those bump outs is because they've got impacts to drainage. So when we install those bump outs, we also have to modify the drainage that's out there, which is the cost prohibitive factor. What I will add is that we're currently going after grants, and we'll continue to do so. So our first set of grants we're going to be going after at the end of December. We just submitted our pre-scoping form for that. And if we don't make that one, we're going to try for the next set in about 6 months. So it's not something we forgot about. It's on our list.
I'm going to let the councilman just chime in here for a second, and then we'll go to Zoom.
Thanks, Jan. I hope I'm not revealing anything that was like private information in our meeting, but from my understanding, because I was pushing for, trying to get the rest of this funded. And in our conversation, I remember you saying that there were like Pittsburgh water facilities that if we cover over that now, then we don't really have a plan to figure that part out yet. And so we could possibly do like 1 or 2 on like maybe like 1 bump out could be put in now, but that's what really wouldn't get us that far. There has to be more, like, to not delay the construction, we would have to move forward. But could you explain what you were telling me about the Pittsburgh water facility is there?
Yeah, absolutely. This isn't top secret information at all. When we were looking at the intersections, there's only 1 bump out, and that's to the northeast, kind of on the hospital side, that doesn't necessarily have one of those storm drains or inlets around it, which means that we would be able to install that concrete bump out without any impacts to PWSA. So in a perfect world, if we had additional funding, we might be able to add that to our project. However, the other 3, which I would debate where your safety impacts are gonna be. They all have catch basins or inlets, near those corners. So, and that's where we get into the drainage modifications. And in this project, we have, trench drains, going in, and that's the cost prohibitive factor. That's, what we can't necessarily include with this project, because it includes the finalization of our James Street plan, as well as additional funding. So unfortunately, no good answer there, but we are still trying for funding, and hopefully soon we'll be able to kind of give you an update on that.
All right, we'll try and rattle through a couple questions on Zoom.
All right, first question is, will signage be in place to advise motorists to yield to pedestrians in the intersection when the motorists are approaching to turn either right or left, where there aren't exclusive pedestrian crossing phases?
I don't believe at this time that we have additional signage on map stars. Some of the types that you might see around town are, it's a big square sign that say, right turning vehicles yield to, and then it's a pedestrian outline. I don't think we have that included as a part of this project. It is something that is very easy to add with our own forces, because we have our own sign shop that installs most of our signs. So it's something that we could look at adding here. So good comment, thank you.
Do you anticipate that there would be a detour required for PRT buses who travel through the corridor during construction?
That's a good question. And I'll just start by saying that PRT is aware of our project, and we've been coordinating throughout design. For stages 2 and 3, all eastbound buses will be maintained. For westbound, will definitely be, for the westbound traveling buses for stages 2 and 3, we'll be coordinating with the PRT. We may need to detour some traffic there, or bus traffic, I should say.
Any more questions in the room? Otherwise, I think we still have 2 on Zoom. Go into the room and then back to Zoom.
One comment and then one question. Going back to the planners, if we do add more planners, I think it's very important that we have a clear maintenance, who's responsible, and everyone understands how often they're going to do it, and that it actually gets maintained and it just doesn't die and now it's a dead bump out. Question, I don't see on the graphs or images here anything specific for all the employee buses that AGH has on North Avenue. I just see parking and bump outs. Is that something you consider, or you might need to remove some of that parking for buses?
For like a shuttle.
The shuttle buses, there's hundreds of them a day.
Yeah, so I know that we did coordinate with the hospital during the design process, and we will continue to do so during the construction process, which is kind of a generic response to your comment there. But that is a question that we can pose to them. And if that is the case, we can look into providing that space.
Can we get cameras so that when a car goes straight through a red light, they will be ticketed? Why are we so far behind the rest of the country?
The cameras that they're referring to are the ARLI cameras, the automated red light enforcement cameras. And I appreciate the enthusiasm. Unfortunately, the ARLI cameras are not going to be something that's part of this project. And that's because our planning and our engineering staff are currently picking some of our worst corridors right now, the most dangerous intersections, the ones that we can improve with that infrastructure and kind of use as a demo. I also believe that that would include additional cost as a part of our project. And I don't believe any of the intersections that they're looking at currently fall along North Avenue. That doesn't mean that won't change in the future, but as of now, this project won't include installing those ARLI cameras.
Any more questions here? Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how much money would have to be raised to build out the infrastructure at the corner of North and James? And if the community was able to come up with that money, could that be added back into the scope?
Yeah, good question. So we have a good idea of the funds that are required, and we're using the designer's 60% design estimate to go after those grants that I mentioned. So for the upgrades, traffic signal upgrades at North and James, as well as the bump outs and the requirements for the drainage at this intersection, we're looking at about 800,000 just for construction. So it's a pretty penny. If you have $800,000 laying around, please let me know. But I just want to reiterate that we are actively going after grants, and we're making sure that we're competitive with those grant asks. And I'm hoping that maybe, I'm optimistic that hopefully we can come back to the community and let you know what our construction schedule is.
And more of those top secret conversations that we've had about that intersection. The reason the concrete work has to happen with the signal, otherwise it would be redundant work. That's right.
Yeah, correct. Sorry about that. So we like to do the bump outs at the same time that we do the signal foundations, because bump outs provide a perfect location for those new signal pole foundations. Our pole foundations are about 10 feet deep. And in the city, there are few and far between areas that we can dig 10 feet deep without hitting some type of utility or what have you. So bump outs give us a little bit of extra space to put those signal foundations in. And if we were to install the bump outs and then come back and do the signal infrastructure, we're going to have to dig out all that concrete that we just placed to put the signal foundations in, as well as the conduits that connect each signal pole. So unfortunately, it makes the most sense to do the two at the same time.
Why in downtown Penn and 6th, the walk signs come on and all of the lights are red? Cannot try to run over folks.
Is that a Barnes dance scramble? Yeah.
So that's a pet exclusive that we mentioned before. So that's currently what's at North and Cedar today, and what we're trying to remove. Well, I'm sorry, could you repeat the last part of that question?
Cannot try to run over folks.
Oh. I hear you. Because all the vehicular legs or phases have the red light, the chances of them running over you is fewer. But what we see is it's never zero, but it can be fewer. What we see is the low compliance that I mentioned previously. So when you're asking the pedestrian to wait for all phases of vehicular travel to kind of cycle through, most people won't wait that long. Most people won't wait, a minute, 30 seconds before they see a gap in traffic. They'll just go for it. And I'm not trying to shame anyone here. Kind of the same way. I kind of get a little antsy at the intersections, but that's what we're going to try to prevent at North and Cedar. And that's why we try to avoid installing that, because we want to install infrastructure that folks follow and trust. And we feel that the pedestrian recall that we're installing along North Avenue is a little bit easier and intuitive and easier to follow.
Any more questions here? Any more on Zoom?
So I have a comment. More residential parking, please, as a resident of the Garden Theater building. And then a question, I guess. I frequent doctors in Oakland and Shadyside. When you press a button or it cycles through, there is a four-way stop. Is this because they are considered higher net worth neighborhoods?
I think that's a reference to the pet exclusive again. And I'll just kind of reiterate that there's pedestrian exclusive sound good, but in practice, what you have is low compliance. And that leads to safety issues as well. So definitely not about equity. We favor the pet recall as opposed to the pet exclusive.
There are more questions on Zoom? Okay.
Yes.
There was a person
I have a question.
hit by an AGH van at the corner of North and Sandusky, died. So I think there should be a no right on red sign there.
Okay, we can look into that. We can look into the design that we currently have. And if it's not added, we can no turn on red. Oh, that's right, correct. All the intersections along North Avenue are gonna be no turn on red. Sorry, I was thinking of right restricted areas. But yeah, all will be no turn on red.
All right, I think that's
Yeah,
all the questions
I-
on Zoom.
I
Any
have
more
a
last minute
question.
questions, comments in the room here?
Yes,
Otherwise, I really appreciate everybody coming out. We're recording this on Zoom. We try and get it up on the Engage page and an email out about a week after. So if you have any neighbors or community members that couldn't make it, feel free to share it. If you need to rewatch anything, please do. The slides are also up there, so you don't have to listen to us talk through the slides. You can just review the slides by yourselves as well. We'll be pushing updates via the Engage page as well. I really encourage folks to hit that follow button on that page. That's what allows us to send updates to folks. And then I'd be remiss, we talk about all this traffic safety stuff. DOMI and the city of Pittsburgh have recently recommitted to our Vision Zero mission, which is zero traffic fatalities in the city. So part of that is the wonderful engineering work that folks are doing here, some of the enforcement work that was mentioned, either automated, police, et cetera. But you as drivers, myself as a driver, we also play a role in that. So if you drove here, I encourage you to drive home safely. One of the things we've really been talking about is whether that, 30 seconds you save responding to a text while you're driving or speeding is really worth, altering somebody's life. So just encourage folks to drive carefully, encourage your neighbors to drive carefully. And then if anybody has complaints about this project, remind them that this is really about protecting people's lives. So, okay, we'll go back to one last question.
yes. Can you hear me?
Just as I have a question about a bus stop, so I'm waiting. What
Yes.
if the person,
Yes, can you hear me? On the audio?
someone else, the question is, what if the person walked to the meeting? I'm not sure what meeting they're referring to.
I think they're talking about this meeting, but yeah, if you walk to this meeting, I encourage you to get home safe if you walked as well. Yes, I'm just putting extra emphasis on drivers. I think there's a lot of responsibility driving massive vehicles, so yeah. I don't think so, yeah. We don't have audio through like the computers.
Okay. Okay.
All right, for anybody else in the room who doesn't want to answer or hear the question or, wants to go, there's pizza in the back. You can grab that while we wait.
What happened to the bus?
What happened to the bus stop in front of Boyle?
Good question. So the bus stop in front of Boyle is getting consolidated with the bus stops at Sandusky and Federal. Both of those shelters are, the shelters at Sandusky are going to see a little bit of improvement, and that was coordinated through PRT.
All right, and if folks have any additional questions, feel free to send them via Engage and we'll get answers back to folks. So thanks to everybody who's stuck around on Zoom and in person. Thanks.